The international break is here, which means that we turn our attentions to looking at a broader spectrum of views around Arsenal as we try and entertain ourselves rather than twiddling our thumbs for the next 2 weeks. So, welcome to the first of what is hopefully going to be a few Let's Talk Arsenal shows. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Let's Talk Arsenal series, a show in which I'm joined by a fantastic, usually it's a fair few people of weird and wonderful natures, but today I'm joined by just one, and it's Laura Kirk-Francis, or as I called you during our live event, Laura Francis Kirk. How are you doing? You good, you well?
I'm good. Either. I'm not fast. Both of them work.
It was one of those, I did it standing on that stage saying the words, and as soon as I said them, I was like, I'm not going to correct myself. Like, there's no coming back from this.
I didn't even notice, so fine by me.
I could have just stayed very quiet, but I didn't, and it shows the honesty, I suppose, that I possess. How are you doing? You good? You well?
All good. Yeah, all good. I am glad for this international break. I have to hold my hands up. I welcome it with open arms at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's the first one of the season where I've actually felt like it's one I want to see happen. The previous two, like the September one's always, the season's just started. Why are we having an international break here? The other one was like, we've built up quite a decent run of form. You know, I want to keep that going. And this one's like, please let it end. Let the football end now. And that's where we find ourselves with, of course, us winning 0 Premier League games between now and the last international break, believe it or not, which has plummeted kind of the moods around the club to the point where we are obviously begging for this international break to come around. So yeah, give me your kind of broad thoughts on, I know it's a big question, but on how the season has fared for you.
I'd say it's been, if I were to pick one word, frustrating. Really, really frustrating. And I think some of that is because, as a direct comparison about how we finished last season, we are comparing what was a brilliant season, all sorts of records, brilliant football being played, with what we have this season, which for me, we just are stuttering and we just haven't got really into a rhythm at all. And it's equally frustrating because you can see every now and then like a little sparkle, like a little hint of what could be and what was last season. And then either it doesn't come to fruition or we are sort of reverting to the Arsenal of maybe a couple of seasons ago. And I think it's just, as a fan, when you know the potential that is on display and that we are not playing to that, it's just like, you want to run on the pitch and just be like, just pull yourselves together. Like, where is the team that absolutely smashed through those fixtures in March that beat, Liverpool, City at home? Like, where's that gone? And in such a short space of time. And it reminds me a little bit of after we'd won the FA Cup under Arteta. We were on a high. We were having a great time. We were playing some nice football, and it just descended so quickly after that. And it's so frustrating that we can go so good to so average so very quickly. So frustration is my word of the day, I think, for Arsenal this season.
Yeah, it has been frustrating. From the perspective, I obviously covering the games, like, and working them, I've usually been able to like detach myself from most of them, but I was working the Chelsea one from home, and I don't think I've ever shouted at the telly more than in that game for quite some time. Like, just there were just individual moments, not even things that like stand out, like you think it would be the goals, but it was like Gabriel Jesus came on and passed the ball inside and then stood there and like just didn't do it. Like, the basic expectation is pass a move, and you're like, you'll need to get back inside. You're not even trying. What's going on?
No, and Chelsea game as well, because for when we scored, I genuinely felt like, oh my God, life is good again. Like, I can hear the birds singing in the trees. Like, there's colour in the world again. Like, Arsenal are back. Only to have that taken away not that long after. So I think it's poor individual performances that ultimately deliver poor overall performances, which seems to kind of, we're in this sort of vicious cycle of people putting in Trossard's been having a difficult season. Martinelli, prior to the weekend, I think is just about getting up to speed, and it's kind of like a sort of infectious disease that one by one is taking down each of our players, like dragging them into this mediocrity, which just isn't what we were about.
No, it's not. I suppose there's two ways of looking at it. The first side, I suppose we can look at, which is we've been so unlucky. Like the most misfortune we have suffered under Arteta's tenure, I think, has happened to us this season in a short space of time. The other side is that some will argue is have we prepared ourselves for that effectively enough? Which some would argue, no, we haven't. But then there's perhaps even a third route, which is the players that we have lost at key points, like Ødegaard, like Saka, are exceptionally difficult to even get the right depth that you can get to cover those players. So where do you kind of sit in terms of the misfortune we've suffered, but how also we have perhaps in some ways left ourselves short?
I do wonder about, I'll come to the injuries in a moment, but I do wonder about the mentality of how you get a team together who went so close last year, but ultimately still failed, to get them to essentially get up and get going again. And I suspect that's one of the hardest things you can do in any professional sport, is to essentially rally the troops and go, your best efforts last time were not good enough. We start again. But I do think the injury situation, number one, Ødegaard, I think at the start of the season, if you had said to me, right, who is the player that if they're injured will have the biggest impact on this side, it probably would have been Ødegaard or maybe Saliba. And he's been out for 8 weeks. Like, this has not been a short injury. And for a while, it was okay, because we had contributions from, we were set piece FC. Plan B was okay. It's really at the stage now where plan C is not working, plan D is not working, and the players seem to kind of be looking at each other for someone to do something, which I think is a very dangerous place to be in, where everyone is looking at someone else to, really lead. And as we saw at the weekend, when Bukayo Saka gets shut down, I hate to say it, Marc Cucurella had a great game. We really do look a bit lost as to how we actually get that cut through. So to answer your question, the injuries really haven't helped us. And you cannot just say, oh, Arsenal just aren't as good anymore. It's like we literally played for 8 weeks without our captain and possibly best player. But at the same time, this is an unusual situation for Arsenal to be in, that they came so close last year, arguably the year before, but to get up and go again is very difficult. And I wonder whether that plays into it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about kind of the looking around at one another for somebody else to take ownership of a game, because there's been a lot of hard-working performance. I think Havertz has worked particularly very hard during games and perhaps hasn't got the reward that maybe he deserves for that. But that, I think, has come from the lack of creativity that has been behind him, not necessarily feeding him. And I think Saka's absence in the Bournemouth game and not being fully fit for the Liverpool game, even though he had a brilliant start to that match, but obviously had to come off in the second half, I think contributed to that. Even when he's come back, I think Saka's been relatively quiet, and other teams have done a very good job in keeping him quiet. Chelsea, of course, put 2, sometimes even 3 players on him, but we saw with Ødegaard back in that game that they had to split resources on that side to cover 2 players, which obviously opened up space, and eventually we scored with Ødegaard producing what was a fantastic ball. And then the last kick of the game, Ødegaard creates the chance for Saliba in behind to then lay off to either Trossard or Havertz. Unfortunately, it was Trossard who missed the chance, but and that could have changed the narrative where Arsenal are right now completely, and Arsenal would be sitting 2 points behind Man City rather than 4, and sitting 7 points behind Liverpool instead of 9, which obviously is still a big gap, but you would look at that and say that's more assailable and more realistic, even at this stage. So where are you at with the title? Are Arsenal, for you, is it done at this point for you already in November, or are you kind of clinging on to some optimism?
Categorically, it is not done. It is not done until a bald man, be that Pep or Arne Slot, has their hands on that trophy, or someone else. It is not over until someone gets their hands.
Fair, it will be a bald man even if it was Chelsea.
It will be a bald man, which is why I'm saying it, right? Yeah. We've got a lot of options in the Premier League at the moment for a bald man to get his hands on the trophy. But
I mean, it might be Arteta by the time we get there, because he would have been so stressed pulling all his hair out.
Can you imagine? Yeah. It'll be. I wonder if it'll go grey first, and it'll just be a silver fox. It is absolutely not over. I think one thing that you should sort of take from this Premier League this season, Man City have lost 4 games on the bounce. 2 of them have been the Premier League. Some of that is a reflection of where they are, but the other side of it is that there is quality throughout the table, and so you cannot write off some of the kind of mid-table teams and lower, right at the bottom teams producing upsets because the quality is so good. So 9 points in November is not ideal. Let's be real here; it's not ideal. But I don't know what the biggest gap that we had last year was, but flip it on its head. If we're 9 points ahead at this stage, if it's Arsenal in the lead, I'm not thinking we've won the title. Absolutely not. It looks very different when you're the leader versus when you're the chaser, and there is a very long way to go. We've certainly had some tough fixtures. We've got unlucky. I absolutely wouldn't give up hope now, and I still believe. I still do, because why else would I do this? Why else would you do this if you didn't think? So yes, it's tough. Yes, it's not ideal, but you have to believe. And Liverpool under a new manager, yes, they're playing really well, but the chances of them having a difficult run of fixtures and maybe dropping some points, then you've got a new manager who will face into that for the first time. It's not guaranteed that yes, they are playing brilliantly and they are on a run of form, but chances are that they might drop some points, and then we'll see what they're really made of. So there's all sorts of possibilities that can still happen. I'm absolutely not throwing in the towel yet. No way.
Yeah, I think Liverpool had like a 10-point lead in a previous season not so long ago and blew it. Like, it's not like teams. I mean, we've had significant leads, in the last couple of seasons, and it's gone all right. So there's almost a desperation from some to say it's over. Maybe that's just I don't know. Maybe it comes from an Arteta criticism standpoint. Maybe it comes from just a pessimism standpoint. It could be one of the two. Some people just want to stop talking about the title altogether, and I think there's some, reasoning behind that. I think Arsenal need to stop looking at the table, stop looking at City's results, stop looking at Liverpool's results, and just focus on winning the next game, because it's all well and good us looking at the title race and looking at the fixtures we've got coming up as quite favourable. If we play like we've played, we're not going to beat Forest. We're not going to beat Man United. We're not going to beat these teams. We need to respond. Did you see things against Chelsea that made you think that there are kind of lights of hope, if you will, to look to?
100%. I think the goal, I think Odegaard's pass is excellent. It's what we expected from him. I thought Marino had some positives to him. I've been a little bit I haven't criticised him, but I've not seen what I think we thought we might see from him yet. So I think there are green shoots of hope, and I think Martinelli scoring is a huge one. That really should act as a bit of a platform for him to kick on. We seem to be sort of like getting maybe 1-2% better each game, but also taking a step back. So at the moment, it does feel a little bit like maybe 1 step forward, 1 step back, kind of treading water in terms of it's not a massive leap forward. I think you'd be stretched to argue that we played immensely better at Chelsea than we have done previously. It's a bit better, but that's not good enough at the moment. What we need is just a little bit of luck. It's the same conversation we had in January of last season when we had like 50 shots on target a game and lost to West Ham and Fulham. And everyone just said, we just need 1 goal to go in. It did. And we went on that incredible run of form. So for me, that feels like that's maybe just around the corner. There were enough positives from Chelsea, but there certainly needs to be some fairly big improvements, not just the kind of like 1% better. We need to come back from this international break and really, really hit the ground running.
I thought that chance we created, no matter how, it pulled at the heartstrings when it didn't go in. But I felt like that was the best chance we've created in 2 months, to be honest. I know we've scored goals, but the way that we built up play down the left-hand side, the pass from Trossard into Odegaard, the laying into Saliba, who's not, I know, usually there, but in that state of the game, you needed someone up the pitch, and he was laying it across the 6-yard box that you'd imagine someone would have normally 9 times out of 10 tapped in. That gave me hope that the Arsenal that we know exists still does exist within this team, and that in a really high pressure moment, they created a massive chance of, that should have been scored. And maybe in a different moment where the pressure isn't as high and the run has not been as bad and the morale is not in the place it is, Trossard either leaves it or finishes it, and Trossard and then Havertz, if he does leave it, taps it in. So I think that moment, just as kind of a touchstone, gave me encouragement that the Arsenal that we know and love is still there. Arteta just needs to kind of coax it out. This international break, as we mentioned at the start, comes at quite a good time. We've got players that have got some issues. Declan Rice, Odegaard, Saka have all pulled out of their international duty with their respective teams. I don't know if you saw on social media today, I think it might have been Oliver Holt who was speaking about how disgraceful it is that the amount of players who've pulled out of international duty for England. John Cross, is a colleague of mine at Reach, also saying that it's kind of the fact that Tuchel's not taking over until next year is ridiculous as well. I'm sure from your reaction there, I think you have seen it. What did you make of those comments?
It's absolute nonsense. For me, it's nonsense. You look at how much football these players are, involved in on a weekly basis over the course of the season. We've just had the Euros. This is our third international break, and it is November. I don't even know what the internationals are. Are they friendlies? Are we qualifying something?
Nations League games.
Right. With the greatest of respect, I don't care, and I don't think I'm alone in that. At this stage of the season, it is all about the domestic football. And if I were a player, I would be doing everything I could to be getting out of that, because not only are you risking injury, every time you are leaving your squad, your rhythm, to go and sync up with a load of players who, up until now, are your enemy. And, I think the anger should not be directed at the players. It should be directed at the FA, the scheduling, because this is an outcome of that. The players, are not. I don't think any of them are saying I don't want to play for my country. It's just I have a body that I have to maintain for 9 months of the year, and me shipping it off to wherever we're going is not conducive to that. So I would direct my anger not at the players, but at the scheduling, at how much football is played, these new formats, these new competitions. That's where your anger should be directed. Certainly not at the individuals. They're just doing what they can to prioritize what is right, and what is right for them is their fitness, and that's simple.
I agree with you. I think it's just overblown. It's such hyperbole. If these players are facing fitness issues, the priority is going to be the Premier League. It's going to be the Champions League. It's going to be relegation battles if that's what they're in. Nations League games for the countries is not going to be high up their list. I mean, even if you win the Nations League, it's barely recognised as an achievement. It's not...
Who cares? Who cares? No one cares. And what I would say as well is that there are positives to some of the bigger players pulling out. I know this is not how England want to see it, but certainly it gives us the opportunity to give caps to players that haven't played before, to try out new formations, whatever. Like that, surely that's a positive from this. But yeah, if we win the Nations League, I'm sorry, I don't care.
Imagine in 50 years' time, you're talking to your grandchildren saying, "I remember in 2025 we won the Nations League."
I'm like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, that's that defunct competition that they abandoned in the mid-20s because no one gave a shit."
The international version of the Intertoto Cup. The what? No, don't worry. It's all gone now. We now play the Super League is what we're playing in 2074. But yeah, I think between different planets, perhaps by then, it might be, a multi-galactic league in 50 years' time. Do you remember those was it the old Adidas or Nike adverts they had where it was like a clone of Messi and Ronaldo?
Yes. I know,
they don't make adverts like that anymore. That was
they don't. Yeah, there was a Nike one as well in the airport, I think, which was phenomenal. But even then, I still feel like the players will be pulling out. They'll be like, "No, I don't want to go to Mars to play in the Galaxy League. I want to stay at home with Arsenal because we want to win the Champions League because we still haven't won it."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still. Goodness me, don't say something like that. 50 years time, I hope so. Fingers crossed. I mean, speaking of those other competitions, obviously we are in a quarterfinal of the League Cup. You've got Crystal Palace at home that you would, touch wood, expect to progress through to a semi-final. I've kind of, I don't know if mocked is too far, but kind of when people have talked about Manchester United and Eric Ten Hag's success in like the League Cup, I've always said like it doesn't bother me in any way. But is there kind of a growing emphasis on us taking that competition very seriously because it's been so long since we have lifted a piece of silverware?
Yeah, I think there is an argument that being able to win in a cup competition will deliver like not only silverware, but what that represents is basically a team of winners. And it's something that's leveled at us all the time, which is for all Arsenal's praise, for all how well they've played in the past 2 seasons, they still haven't won anything. And that would put a little bit of a dampener on that. Regardless of the quality of the competition or whatever you think about it, it shows a winning mentality and an ability to go on a winning run, which just from a kind of vibes point of view is always good. I think it will deliver more for the actual team and the confidence that they will get from going on a good run in either of the cup competitions, because when it comes to cup football, it's ruthless, and I think that's what we're missing out on in the league. And it feels like there's something that we can learn from being in a cup competition where all you've got to do is win. That we can take to the league. But we've won a trophy 4 years ago. I think we should be taking both of them pretty seriously.
Yeah, Jamil says we should be taking the Carabao Cup very seriously since we've won nothing in so long. I'd like to win it. I think obviously it being so early in the season as well, and Man City have already been knocked out of it. Spurs are still in it. Gives us another reason to stop them, winning a trophy. It's extra motivation if we didn't need it already as well. And I think
everyone wants to go to Wembley as well. Like it's been years since we've had a nice day out at Wembley. Like on a purely kind of fan basis, there is nothing like going to Wembley.
Community Field, but do we count that?
Sure, yeah, sure. But that
it counts if you win it. That's
yeah, for sure.
Indeed. Was it something a viral Man City fan went around like the year when we beat Man City? He was like, "Oh, you've won a plate! Like, congrats!" And I think Man City won it. Did they win it this year? And there's a video of the same guy going around like, "Yeah, we won the commission." It's just online fandom.
It's the same with the Carabao Cup, isn't it? Like you can dig out tweets from Man United fans so easily, calling it a Mickey Mouse Cup. Like it's just Twitter does not lose the receipts. You will be found out. But if we win the Carabao Cup, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, I'm not going to say no to it. It's certainly my lowest of my priorities for the season. But when you're 4 games away from winning it, which I still think is ludicrous that there's a semi-final that's double-legged if Arsenal get there, more games to play. And it's Liverpool, of course, is still in that competition. Spurs are still in it. Are Chelsea still in it as well? I think. Let me try and find.
They beat Brighton or someone similar. Can't remember.
No, Chelsea are out. So it's Arsenal, Palace, Newcastle, Brentford, Southampton, Liverpool, and Tottenham, Man United are the 4 teams left in the 8 teams left in the competition. So yeah, I mean, Southampton at home to Liverpool. You think Liverpool will get through? You think Arsenal will get through against Palace? You think Newcastle will beat Brentford? And Newcastle are obviously another team that are desperate to win some silverware as well after the investment they've put in. And then you Spurs, Man United, you could literally toss a coin on that one. Both of those teams are, just hilarious when it comes to trying to work out their results. So that could be fun. Liverpool, of course, are in it. What have you made of kind of how they've done since being taken over by Arne Slot? Because they are so far ahead of Arsenal right now from a points perspective. And I suppose what a lot of people would say is it's taken Arteta 3 and a bit years to get into the title race, and Slot's doing it in his first season.
Yeah, and to be fair, I have to agree. But I think ultimately you have to look at the squad that Arteta inherited versus the squad that Slot inherited. I think Liverpool, and it seems to go under the radar a bit, chronically underperformed last year. We always talk about Arsenal being so close last year, but there was a point, not that long before the end of the season where Liverpool were in it. That day that we ended up losing to Aston Villa at home, that was kind of them bowing out of the Premier League kind of title race. So the idea that Slot has kind of come in and reinvigorated this struggling side in a year, you can't really compare that to Arteta in good faith. I think yes, there is a argument that 5 years into Arteta's kind of reign, we should have won something. But I think they're two totally different cases. Like Arteta inherited a hot mess and has taken his time to shift off some of the deadwood. Yes, he's made some difficult decisions. He's also in his first managerial role. Like you're comparing an experienced manager to Arteta. Lest we forget, this is his first time in charge of a team. So yes, I'm sure that will be levelled at Arsenal should Liverpool win the league and we don't. But for me, this is, I think, Liverpool's last hurrah with their current group of players. If we are to believe that Van Dijk, Alexander-Arnold, etc., could be leaving, this is them at their peak. Whereas I still think we might be one season away, and none of that is to do with the manager. It's just Liverpool were very close last year and are looking to go close this year because they've got the same set of players. And I think that's ultimately that's how I see it. But I'm sure we'll hear all about it, that we are trusting the process and Liverpool have got there before we did.
Yeah, no, it's football. Only one team can win the league, and Liverpool have been a side that have been up there competing for the title for the last 5-6 years alongside Manchester City. The Arsenal's project has been about getting to this point and then trying to go to that one step further. We have got ourselves back to a place where we've not been in well over a decade, and we did that in not 5, but we did it in 3 years, and now we did it ahead of what some people would say was ahead of schedule as well, to get to that high up position and finish second in 2023. I'm obviously finishing 2 points behind Man City earlier this year, and now the idea was that you would then go that next step this season, but factors have happened, but it's still not over. I do point out to people that at the moment, I think we are, when you look at the fixtures that we've had, we're 4 points worse off in the relative fixtures that we've had this season compared to last season's fixtures. But we've got obviously some fortuitous games coming up. You've got Fulham away coming up, which would be a game where you can turn around a loss from last season. And also, if Arsenal managed to drop less than 6 points between now and the new year, they would have actually dropped less points this season at the same point compared to last season. So it's funny how things can quickly, change when you can string a run of wins together. And that's the challenge for Arsenal now is trying to find that next win. Some of the players we hope will be back. One of them is a player that I don't think I've ever seen anyone tweet about more than you. Riccardo Calafiori being one of them. First of all, what is it about him that just draws you in, Laura, so much?
Oh, he's just he just seems like he's a really nice guy with a great personality.
Yeah,
just a really, really wholesome character, very talented. Yeah, definitely. It's all about what's on the inside. Yeah, for me, that's what I'm trying to. Oh, he's a good looking man. He's a good looking man. Even my husband says it. He's like, yeah, that's a good looking man. It's fine.
Yeah, no, he is very annoyingly attractive when he walks through the mix zone. I'm waiting for the players. It's not only just like his looks. He's incredibly tall and imposing as well. He's won the lottery at birth, is what you would say.
Yeah, he looks like he should be in a like a Dolce & Gabbana perfume advert. That's kind of like the vibe. Yeah,
advert.
Dabbing off cool water type vibe.
Indeed. But how much have we've missed him a lot, because I think you would talk about Ødegaard, and Ødegaard's taken a lot of the the emphasis and a lot of the focus. But I feel as though when he got injured against Shakhtar Donetsk, that loss of him against Liverpool, when we had to then finish with a back four of Partey, Kivior, Lewis Skelly, and I think Saliba. No, not Saliba. He was suspended. Who was it? Was Gabriel the only one in the back line still by that point?
We finished with a absolute madness in the back four. Yeah,
I can't even remember who the back.
Kivior, Ben White.
Oh, was Ben White there? It might have been Ben White
there. Yeah,
Partey, White, Kivior and Lewis Skelly might have been the back four at that point. Yeah, mad. But Calafiori, I felt like, was building up that partnership with Martinelli. The left-hand side was looking better, and then we lose him as well. So how much of a return is he going to bring to this side, other than raising the rating out of 10 for the team, of course?
Yeah, I think losing him at the point that we did was really cruel, because he was, as you said, he was just getting into his stride and really kind of making his mark on Arsenal. I think what he offers us when he kind of inverts, there have been times when I'm watching him on the pitch, I'm like, be, watching him more than other players, and I'll be like, where's he going? Where are you going? Like,
Yeah.
you're floating into the midfield. You're kind of very very fluid in terms of where he sits, the space that he takes up, and he's also, as you said, he is really tall, and I think he's quite an imposing figure, both from a kind of attacking and defensive standpoint. So I think to get him back will be, again, another boost. And I think that it also addresses an area which we haven't really spoken about, but we have started to leak goals in a way that we just didn't last year. And I feel, in the same way that I felt when Saliba really first broke into the side, I feel so much more comfortable when Calafiori's on the pitch. He just has that reassuring presence. I think he's very good taking the ball out of our half. And for me, it adds a sense of security, which we seem to be lacking at the moment. The goal against Newcastle that we conceded, yes, it's a great goal. But the one against Chelsea, I think there were elements where we could have been a bit tighter. So I think having him back in the side is really, really important for not just the kind of connection that he has with Martinelli, but we need to stop conceding goals so easily.
Yeah. It's so odd as well that it happened. I mean, we were conceding goals from set pieces. Bournemouth scored a goal from a set piece and a penalty. Liverpool scored a goal from a set piece. Inter got a penalty against us. Like, we're just, the mistakes that have just crept into our game have been so frustrating. I know the Inter penalty it should never be a penalty. It's ridiculous. But the Bournemouth one, it's naive at the back. There was a moment yesterday in Sunday's game against Chelsea where Jackson ran through, was thankfully offside. But in the moment, I was like, oh, it's another mistake. They've scored. They've gone on to win it. And thankfully he was offside. But those kind of moments where I feel like the defenders are getting split and runners are getting through is happening worryingly often in these games. And
I wonder if it's a confidence thing that just they are, as I said, they are sort of looking at each other to make something happen when we're going forward. And I wonder whether it's the same in defence, that we were previously so solid. I can't, there were maybe a handful of mistakes last year that you could go, actually, that was just out to individual error, but it just seems to be creeping in a little bit. There's definitely been a couple from Saliba as well, which is very unlike him.
Yeah.
And you just think maybe there's something in the mentality that they're lacking the confidence, which is then affecting their decision making and how they work together.
Yeah, 100%. It's difficult to not view some of the errors that they've made and think that's just so out of character. I mean, Saliba did that mistake for France as well in the last international break, and that led into errors that he then made for us. But it's been so good for so long that obviously there's an element of, is it just a case of Arsenal work? You can't kind of maintain that level of defensive security. And I also think that when you start conceding goals, you lose that element of intimidation. You lose that element of people thinking you're faultless. And it gives other teams encouragement that, you can be got at, that mistakes can be found. And, from set pieces, we've not been as good this season, I think, offensively and defensively, because teams have got savvier to what we're trying to do. It's felt like, just stop Gabriel and you'll probably stop Arsenal from scoring from a set piece. And that's surprising considering how many tall players are in the team. With, Gabriel, you've got Saliba, you've got Marino who adds extra height in the box, you've got Havertz who brings extra height in the box. So it has been a little bit surprising in that sense. But maybe after this international break, we'll get, a bit of a rejig, a reset, and focus from there. We're going to take some questions from the chat box now. I haven't been saving them up throughout the show, but if you want to throw some in now, use a capital Q to help them stand out. You can follow Laura, of course, on Twitter at LauraKirk12. Doesn't care about the Francis on Twitter. Is that a marriage thing?
It's my married name, and I've not changed it on anything. I just can't be bothered with the admin. I just can't be bothered.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. I mean, my missus still uses her original name on emails, and I'm just like, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm not hurt. Bradley Pooh says, this is a tougher league this year. We have had the toughest of starts and the unluckiest of injuries. Do you think the other top 6 teams could cope with our fixture and lack of luck so far?
Yes and no. I think I could probably split it 50-50 in terms of 50% completely, self-inflicted classic Arsenal nonsense, which I think you can look at the red cards, you can look at some of the individual mistakes, and then 50% I would say is actually just really, really unlucky. So if you were to flip that on its head, looking at if Liverpool had our fixtures of Man City, I think they would have found it tough. I think the difference is where we have been kind of huffing and really trying, but ultimately not finding that cut through. Liverpool and City have the types of players, and Chelsea, to be honest, have the type of kind of like very key players that they can call upon in those moments. So Mo Salah, Cole Palmer, etc. Whereas we, I think, Havertz kind of was that guy last season, whereas we seem to, as I said, sort of be looking at each other to find that difference maker. So I do think we've had a really tough start, and I hope that in the coming weeks, when our rivals start going away to big sides, etc., we might see some luck come our way. But I think we also need to look at ourselves and go, yeah, there are a couple of things there that were just plain stupid and cost us points, which we cannot point at anything other than ourselves.
Yeah, the Newcastle game stands out. Obviously, it's just a disgusting performance. Like, there's unforgivable performance. And it doesn't matter who was there, who wasn't there. It didn't matter. Arsenal weren't winning that game because the application was horrendous. But in what Grant said, like Man City have lost Rodri, and they are feeling that now. With the injuries they've suffered. If Liverpool happen to get, Trent Alexander-Arnold's got a bit of an issue at the moment, depending on how long he's out for. Let's see if that has any impact on their game. But it's when you've got the attack that they've got and such depth as well. You've got Salah, you've got Nunez, Jota, Gakpo. They've added Chiesa to the squad as well. Luis Diaz has had a really good start to the season. And then they've got obviously a midfield, which I think is obviously, as we all know, lacking a defensive midfielder and lacking kind of that deeper midfielder. And they tried to sign that player in Zubimendi, and Man City, I think, will try and go for him now as a replacement for Rodri in January. But it's still an incredible wealth of talent that they've got in that team. So yeah, I think that the other teams would have coped to a degree, but we're seeing that a club like Man City loses a key figure in Rodri, and that's having a knock-on effect on their form. So thank you, Grant, for your question. Spencer says, what are some of the things that you both do to tune out from the noise of punditry and social media and toxicity fandom? Mine is running, but everyone is, of course, different.
That's actually a great question, because I think if I'm very transparent, I've been taking some of these Arsenal losses very hard. After the Bournemouth one, I remember going to work on the Monday and thinking, life is dreadful. life is just dreadful. Life is so unfair. And so I tend to basically turn my phone off for a few hours after the game. I don't need to see everyone reacting on Twitter. I know some people kind of really get a buzz from that, but for me, I just don't need to see it. So particularly on a Sunday, my husband loves watching NFL. So he tends to sit there with the NFL on, which has obviously nothing to do with football. And I sit and it's just the thing you need to remember is that by literally just turning off your devices, and you can remove yourself from it. It is quite easy. And so I just tend to turn my phone off, turn Twitter off. It can just be contained in that little bubble, and then all of the usual things, go and do some exercise, go and look at the sky, pet your dog, and try and kind of just contain it, because it really is some of it just noise. And as we all know, the most extreme opinions and the loudest voices cut through anything, whether they make sense or not. You just don't. You have the autonomy to remove yourself from that, and I think it's really important to remember it. Obviously, that's different for people like yourself, Tom, who work in football media and covering football. I do have the privilege of on a Monday morning going to a job that has nothing to do with football, so I can just throw myself into it. But I do think it's very difficult.
Yeah, my situation is different, because, it's an 8 a.m. show the next day. It's a 9 to 5 job all about Arsenal, which is incredibly privileged in itself to have, and I don't take it for granted. But it has meant that I've needed to teach myself to detach emotionally so much from the game at points. trust me, my laptop still goes flying if we score a 90th minute winner in the press box. It's hard to contain yourself. But it's strange. Like if I'm sitting in the press box while watching a game and we score, I barely react now because I'm too busy writing because I'm doing the live blog during the game. Whereas before, at the start, when I started out, it was really hard. I remember like punching the desk and like 3 journalists around me looking like, who the hell is this guy? Who's this noob who's turned up to, and I've had to learn to not do that. And everyone knows about the infamous Aston Villa away game, of course, with the press box and what it was like there. That was an experience. But, you do detach. You need to have other hobbies and interests outside of football. And that can be, obviously, as Laura said, exercise, go and do what you need to do, or you can have, family and friends to spend time with. But I think the worst thing that you can do is to go on social media after Arsenal lose, because the only people really that are engaging on there is 2 types of people. One of those is the people that try to make sense of it and try to provide some perspective. And there are some really good people out there that do that. And the others are just people that are profiting off the hatred and the toxicity and the meltdown. So, and unfortunately, those voices are a lot louder, and the algorithm is much more likely to force that stuff in front of you as well. So, yeah, my advice always after we lose is switch off. That's why I used to do raw reactions straight after games. I'm not going to be working the Fulham game. I'm still not going to do a reaction straight after. I respect Elliot and the Vision guys for doing their instant reactions. I can't ever see me doing an instant reaction stuff as much anymore, just because I'm not thinking straight in those moments. Really. And I've still got to write a piece usually after games as well.
Yeah. One thing I would say is that one thing that I do find that helps me is when I've had time to calm down and, separate myself, is to remind myself, number one, I chose this, right? I chose this life. Yes. I chose this. Yeah. And number 2, corny as it sounds, how lucky I am to have something that I care so deeply about. I often, with friends who don't follow football or don't have anything in their life that they care as much about, I'm kind of like, what is that hollow existence? And it's kind of just like, it is high risk, high return. The low moments are pretty shocking, but the high moments make it worth it. And when you're in the low moments, you just have to kind of think, this is the price I pay for the Bournemouth goal. This is the price I pay for the Declan Rice goal against Man United last year. Like it is just a bit of a roller coaster, and you kind of just remind yourself that it is part and parcel of it, and that being part of this, again, this is starting to get a bit corny, but you chose this life, and it is incredible.
Yeah, some of you think of some of the moments that we share. You that's what you accept. You live through the smooth, you live through the rough. That's what it is as an Arsenal fan. That's why I get so frustrated at such the entitlement that some people think that we're entitled to win things, and that's not what sport is. If you picked Arsenal because they've had a record of winning big things, that's fine. But you have to come to the reality that we don't always win these big things. There are going to be periods where the newfound global Manchester City fan base one day are going to get a reality check when they go through periods of not winning things, and hopefully that's very soon. Just a heads up, because it has hit 5:45. We've been going for about 15 or so more minutes, but the Arsenal against Juventus game in the Women's Champions League has just kicked off. So if you're looking for something to watch tonight, make sure you give the girls some support. So yes, thank you, Spencer, for your question. It's nice to get kind of a little bit of a detachment from the football stuff in some ways. Oda says, for Tom and Laura, Martinelli has been very inconsistent. Do we start looking for a challenger that in a position could take that spot? And who is realistically available, do you think, in January or the summer?
So before Martinelli scored on Sunday, I did, into my WhatsApp groups, say, we need to have a little chit chat. We need to have a very serious chit chat about Martinelli. I still think he's a brilliant player when he's on his day. But as per the conversation we've been having for 45 minutes, Arsenal are going for a title. And I don't know if Martinelli is good enough in that position.
Not it's almost like you feel wrong for saying that.
I feel wrong, but
yeah. I get battered when I criticise Martin. I get told I've got an agenda. I get told XYZ, But yeah, sorry, go on.
I agree. I just take that, take away all the kind of agendas and you just digging him out. You just hate him. You hate, etc., etc. I don't know whether he is capable of delivering what we need him to, and to get to that next level.
Yeah.
I still think he's a very good player, but I don't know whether very good is going to cut it. When you look at, Neto, who was brilliant, it's just not quite there. Even when he's on his best, I still think, could we upgrade? Possibly. Would I upgrade if offered? Again, I have absolutely no idea who we would go for in that position, but I think it's completely legitimate to be able to not necessarily criticize, but just go, actually, the level that he's at and the level that his potential isn't actually what we need, and we need something better there.
I guess what's frustrating for me is that that 22-23 season when he scored, I think scored 15 and got 5 assists as well. I'll get the numbers up specifically for it, but it's like, that's where I get where people get defensive, is because I know those people believe that he's got that in him, because we've seen it. We know that he has been capable of producing that level of performance. 15 goals, 6 assists, which was 15 and 5 in 36 Premier League games. More than a goal contribution per every couple of games. That is a really good return at 2 years younger than he is now, and you would have expected him to kind of continued on that pathway. So I suppose the question is this a him problem? Is it an Arteta problem? Because we've seen so many players improve under Arteta, but Martinelli has regressed in the last couple of years. So if we ignore the transfer side of it, because that's really easy to go, just get an upgrade, but we've seen that he's got quality, so surely it is then on us to get that from him again.
Yes, he has quality. I still think, though, that at his ceiling, is that still good enough? You're talking about the 22-23 season, and yes, he was brilliant, but I think the Marseille that we are more likely to see is inconsistent. Not only kind of poor in his decision making, but I think how he plays often affects the rest of the team. And I think you can't have someone who is not delivering by themselves, because I think he often has a few shots on target which someone else might take. He tends to just blast it straight at the keeper. But also, if he's affecting the rhythm and how we actually end up getting the ball into the box, then you really have to take a step back and go, is this the profile of the player that we want in this position? There are still games where you think, oh, this is a Martinelli game. If we can get the ball over the top, he can run. He can progress the ball so quickly. But is he at his ceiling where he is at the moment? Is actually that level that we saw in 22-23? Was that him actually having a blinder? But it's the type of season that he's not going to be able to reproduce. And I'm sorry to say it, at the moment, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, and that's very honest, and I think that's probably the reality of the situation for Martinelli, is that it's going to be very difficult to see, from what we've seen, him being able to achieve those numbers again. I think there is an argument that, without Marino being fit, without Calafiori being there consistently, who I thought, he partnered with much better when he was in that partnership on the left-hand side. But you can't rely on just having certain players to make a player good, especially if you're in a title race. You need those players to step up. When Odegaard is out, when Saka is out, you need other players in the team to stand up and produce. And we have seen Martinelli is meant to be one of those players. You think about when Liverpool have missed Salah, you think about when maybe he's not been on best form. Luis Diaz has stepped up and become one of the best left wingers, if not the best left winger at the moment, in the Premier League. And that's just what Arsenal have to deal with. In terms of names, I like Mohamed Kudus a lot at West Ham, and I think he's got the versatility to play, on the right, on the left, even potentially in Odegaard's role if you indeed needed him to in times of crisis. Flo Show in the chat said Nico Williams, who has had a slower start to this season. He's not had the campaign that I think people expected him to build on from the Euros. So then, are you buying another Martinelli, a player that's got showed a lot at one season at a really young age? The expectation has come, and he's now not delivering. And I think maybe that's something to look into, is that I think you need to find somebody, perhaps. I mean, Luis Diaz, for instance, this is a guy that wasn't like a young 20-year-old when he signed for Liverpool. This is a player that had been doing and putting in numbers in the Portuguese league for a few seasons. I think 3 seasons, 26 goals in 77 games. For Porto, he's now got 21 goals in 78 games for Liverpool. So it's a very similar return of what we've seen there and with Liverpool. So, yeah, I think that we need to consider that when we look at who we bring in. It doesn't need to be a 20-year-old, youngster up and coming. It could be a 24, 25-year-old that's been producing it for a few seasons and then needs that next step forwards. Couple more before we wrap up. Ian, speaking of the left-hand side, I suppose, says, how much are we missing Smith Rowe right now? Would have given us great cover when the skipper was out injured.
Oh, hindsight is a beautiful thing. And to be fair to Smith Rowe, he is showing us what we're missing. I still don't know whether he actually would have given us great cover. I still think that would have been asking a lot of him, given that he has not been in the side consistently, to suddenly go, right, you're stepping into Martin Odegaard's shoes. We need you to deliver. I still think we made the right decision.
Do you know how many goal contributions he has this season, off the top of your head? No, that's mean.
No, many.
Three goals and 2 assists. Do you know how many goals and assists Martinelli has this season? 3 goals and 2 assists.
Interesting. To be fair, there are levels to this game, all right? Yeah. He can ball out at Fulham. Love that for him, but it's not the same as doing it for Arsenal. I am delighted for him. I'm definitely, it's like breaking up with someone and you ultimately end on really good terms. You wish them well. Whether he could have stepped into Odegaard's shoes, don't know. Maybe that's what he actually needed, was that kind of like really big opportunity that we just couldn't give him. But ultimately, there's no way that you could have foreseen that we would have been out without Odegaard for that long. So for me, it's still the right decision.
It's the same with Fabio Vieira. Like, for so long, people had been telling me he's one of the worst signings we've made under Arteta with a £34 million investment. I don't think he's a bad player, but I think it wouldn't be unfair to say he's been one of the worst investments, of the club under Arteta and Edu. £34 million is a lot of money that could have gone on somebody else. It's more money than we spent on Martin Odegaard, for example. So, when it comes to that, I don't think the idea of saying, we shouldn't have loaned him out when he's been widely criticised as one of our worst signings, I just don't think makes any sense. I think for the people's perspective, they feel we didn't replace him well enough. And when we let Smith Rowe go and we let Fabio Vieira go, the idea was that and I think that, to be honest, I think the only player that we didn't really replace was Eddie Nketiah, because Merino replaces Smith Rowe's position in the team. I feel as though Waneri replaces Fabio Vieira as well in the team, although I believe he should have played more minutes than he has to this point. But Nketiah is the one we let a centre forward go and we didn't bring one in. We let Nelson go and got Sterling in, and we still needed a forward. I felt, even when we brought Sterling in, I felt like we needed a wide player, and then we ended up letting Nelson go on top of that. So that, I think, is where there's rightful criticisms about maybe where we left ourselves short. But there were restrictions to that, and we didn't bring in much money until the end of the window when we saw Ramsdale and Nketiah on deadline day, by which point responding is near impossible. So therefore, I guess the question is, Laura, is there no excuses for Arsenal not to spend in January?
I mean, I think they will find excuses. There are always excuses when it comes to Arsenal.
Resigned. What can we do?
Sure. I think there will be a very large gap between what the fans expect and what Arsenal are actually going to go in for. Remembering that it's January, the window looks different. I think the idea that we're suddenly going to break the bank and go and get Isaac from Newcastle, I can't see it. Whether there is some other players that we could bring in, who are not of that profile, but that could fit into that kind of centre forward role. I still think that's where.
Not who. I don't press for names, but like,
what am I actually expecting?
Generally, what are you expecting to happen?
What I would like is a centre forward, because when Havertz goes off the ball, which I think is unfair at the moment. I mean, he's not off the ball, but certainly he's not quite as prolific as he was towards the back end of the season. And when Saka is shut down, I'm genuinely like, I have no idea how we are getting that ball in the back of the net.
Yeah.
Because our set pieces seem to have sort of fallen off a little bit. Martinelli is trying, but ultimately it is ineffective. So you go, right, literally what
Where?
is the identity of this team if we are not attacking down the width, we can't get the ball in because there's no one there. So I still say a centre forward would be my preference. Difficult to sign, I think, in the January window. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't think there is any excuse not to reinforce in some way. And I'm not saying that's Victor Gyökeres or Isak or, that's not what I'm saying. But I think after bringing in 50 plus million on deadline day that couldn't be reinvested, you have freedom. There is some financial freedom there to spend. And you're in a position where you've been very punishingly reminded of what not having depth in certain areas can do to you. So, and I think there are players out there. I think there are definitely figures out there. As we get closer, I'm sure we'll start to see links and we'll start talking about more about who those players might be. But, I definitely think that Arsenal don't really have much in the way of an excuse to not bring someone. If we get to deadline day on January and we've not signed anyone, I will be fuming.
Yeah, and I think at that point you go, right, you're placing so much trust in the existing squad to deliver the enormous expectations that we've got. I think that should we get to the end of the season with no silverware and you look at that January window, you'd go, hang on a second, actually that's a really big misstep from Arsenal. If the finances were there, the right player was there, you've just had the first half of the season absolutely riddled with injuries. It feels quite unforgivable that would be the outcome. Yeah. Especially if we go deep in these cups, we've got endless amounts of football to be played. Like you said, 2 semi-finals if we're in the Carabao Cup. No idea what the format is with the Champions League, but more games there if we go, really deep into that as well. So the squad ultimately starts to look very thin.
Yeah, absolutely. I've time for one more. Let's go to Jonathan to finish it off. Is it fair for Mikel to be under pressure from his detractors? Arsenal is a huge club and expectation should always be there, in my opinion.
That's a really good question. And I think in the madness of the world that we live in with football managers at the moment, yes, it makes total sense that he is under pressure, right? You've got clubs that go through a manager every 6 months because they're not delivering what the club wants.
Yeah.
I think it's very short-termist. I think it's a sort of, some people are saying it's because of the results that we've had recently. Others are kind of like blowing up as to, you didn't win the title last year, now you're not going to win it this year, therefore he should be under pressure. Personally, I think it's madness, given the context of the league that we are in. They might be going through a difficult period so far, but you're asking a new manager to compete with the best Premier League side with the most finances we've ever seen. And if that is the benchmark, then I think it's very, very harsh to suggest that because that Premier League title has not been delivered just yet, he should lose his job. However, it is very much in line with the type of turnover we see at the moment with managers that, club has an expectation around the type of football that's played, the results that get delivered. I think, to be honest, it's more in that kind of, how the managers are, how the relationship is with the owners, and for the time being, it looks like, Edu aside, Mikel has the backing of the owners of Arsenal. So in that sense, I think he's secure. But I can totally see why, from the outside, you'd go, well, hang on a second, no silverware, in a sticky patch now. For another club, this might be the perfect opportunity to get rid.
Yeah. And look, I mean, if you look at the 2 most successful clubs in the last 10 years, which have been Manchester City and Liverpool, with the Champions League wins, with the Premier League wins, and the other trophies they've come up with, that's come with sticking with the managers. I mean, Klopp had a season where he finished, I think even outside of the top 4 one season, stuck with him. I think he finished in 4th another one of the seasons. They stuck with him, even when there was pressure from a lot of Liverpool fans at those times, and came good. And that's because it's not just about sticking with, the people that are getting you where you are, but also it comes with smart recruitment, which, if you're Chelsea, they've had to spend $1 billion in their first season and then spent more on top of that, to get Cole Palmer, basically. And on top of that, They've then sacked Maurizio Pochettino, who, I think had a decent season in the end, considering all the factors. They brought in Enzo Maresca. They're sitting in third now, but when you look at third, is currently a point away from being ninth. I think the season's going to look very different come May for a lot of these teams. So let's wait and see and get a better idea of where everybody sits at the end of the season. Arteta's not unsnackable. No one's unsackable. No one's invincible, to use an Arsenal phrase, in managerial terms these days. It's just no one person's ever bigger than the club. And if a decision has to be made in the future, I think we'll all eventually come to a consensus about that. But I think the idea that where we are as a club right now, where we've got to, if we don't win anything this season, means that you have to get rid of the manager and go to, God knows who, you go to after that. At the moment, the managerial market's not exactly the most attractive place in the world. I just don't think there's much substance behind that position right now. Laura, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on X at Laura Kirk 12. Because it's the international break, I have no idea what I'm even going to be tweeting about at the moment. Probably Calafiori, the weather, and maybe some other sports that I might dabble in just to keep myself interested. But that's where you can find me.
Nice. Yes, please make sure you do. And thank you once again, Laura, for coming on. Thank you, listeners, for showing us plenty of love, as always, in the chat box. Temi says movies. Any international break movie recommendations or series?
Oh, this is very boring, but I'm binging MasterChef, The Professionals at the moment. It's a real guilty pleasure.
I've only watched the first one. Yeah.
Get up to speed.
I will. Yeah, we're watching that. I've Married at First Sight. Currently watching through that.
Yeah. I've booked to go and see Gladiator 2 at the weekend, which is a dog-friendly screening. So I'll be taking my little dog with me.
Oh, nice.
Which should be good. Just remember that there's, use it as a little time to get outside and remember there's other things apart from Arsenal Football Club.
Absolutely. Get outside, go for walks, go do some exercise. My series recommendation at the moment is a series called Bad Monkey, which is on Apple TV. It's Vince Vaughn, who's like a detective in the Caribbean, and it's very, very funny. And yeah, quite entertaining. So yeah, it's not like any Vince Vaughn thing I've ever seen before. And even if you don't like him, I think you'll like the series because it's very good. So I would recommend that. It's very good indeed. But thank you to everyone that's listening. Appreciate your time. Do drop a like to the video. Go watch the Arsenal win, playing against Juventus, of course, in the Champions League. And I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, bright and early, for the next 8 a.m. show, rounding up all the latest news, including, of course, news that Odegaard has returned to Arsenal. Won't be taking part in any of the of that. And we managed to get for a whole hour without talking about David Coote, which I think is definitely an achievement in itself.
There's nothing to say, really, is there? He said all that needs to say.
He has said it all. Thank you for listening, people. We'll see you again very soon. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.